Glory to Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm sorry. Christ is risen. I always forget that during Paschal Tide. Christ is risen, and welcome to St. Cyril Methodius, Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I'm Father Gregory, the pastor. It's good to be with you this morning. I want to talk to you about a conversation I had yesterday with local peace and justice advocates here in the Madison area about the war in Ukraine. And while some of the conversation was really, I think, good. Most of it really was not, and that's for a variety of reasons. Some have to do with the particulars of public policy, U.S. Foreign policy relative to Ukraine, and then politics between Russia and Ukraine. But fundamentally, what made the conversation less than, I think, helpful is something that the Catholic philosopher Jacques Maritain mentions in his book on the philosophy of art, philosophy of beauty, philosophy of aesthetics. He says that Christian art needs not only piety technique, but not only piety, but also technique. And so often what we run into in our spiritual lives is a great deal of piety, a great deal of very good intentions, but without the proper technique, without really knowing how to put that piety into practical action. Certainly this is one of the takeaways I had from my conversations with the peace and justice advocates yesterday, but it's something I've seen, noticed frequently in conversations when people talk about the situation in Ukraine. And specifically, I have in mind those people who want the U.S. to end all arms shipments to Ukraine. And the argument is that if you stop shipping arms to Ukraine, then the war will stop. And of course, it will. If Ukraine isn't armed, then the war will stop. But the war will stop to the advantage of Putin and Russia. An unarmed Ukraine is simply going to be overrun by Russian forces, and then all of the bad things that we've seen, the genocide, the rape and kidnapping being used as weapons of war, the war crimes, torture, all the summary execution of Russian soldiers by Russian troops, all of this will just increase many times. That's an extreme example of what happens when we have piety, good intention, without technical knowledge, without the technique that we need to put our good intentions into effect. I have to admit, it is one of the great frustrations that I run into, not just as a priest, but also as someone who spends a lot of time talking about economics and psychology, the social sciences, is this tendency among Christians and even Orthodox Christians to minimize the importance of technique. None of us would think about building a new church, putting up a new church building without first consulting an architect and an engineer. And yet we jump into the spiritual life without proper guidance. If you spend time reading the Philokalia, one of the things that you discover is that we need to have a guide in the spiritual life, not necessarily a spiritual father along the monastic model, but someone who can help us test reality, help us make sure that we stay on the right path as opposed to falling into a delusion. We simply cannot depend on good intentions. We simply cannot depend simply on our piety, because when we do, we open ourselves up to all sorts of disasters, and not just disasters for us, but for the people around us. Again, the conversation I had with the peace and justice advocates, I'm sure they meant well, but they were asking the U.S. government, or wanted to ask the U.S. government, to do things that would really result in Ukraine being obliterated, and the people of Ukraine suffering great hardship. Piety needs technique, whether we're talking about the ethics of geopolitics, or just about our personal spiritual lives, or anything in between. Piety and technique, separated from techniques separated from piety becomes works righteousness, but piety separated from technique becomes simply delusion. So, what about you? Are you getting that balance between piety and technique right? Or is that something you struggle with? Well, in any case, it's now a little after 8 o'clock, and I have to get ready for liturgy. If you are in the Madison area, come and visit us at St. Cyril and Methodius Ukrainian Orthodox Church, 1020 Regent Street on the Isthmus in downtown Madison. If you are Orthodox, yeah, come along. If you're not Orthodox, come along. Be lovely to see you, and we can talk a little bit more about piety and technique if you'd like. If you're not in the Madison area, maybe, and if you're try to find an Orthodox church. Again, if you're Orthodox, you should be at liturgy this morning. And if you're not Orthodox, take a look, see what we're about. All right. Well, if you'll excuse me, Christ is risen. I hope everyone has a very good and happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all of our moms and our grandmothers and our godmothers, our aunts, our sisters, our daughters, our nieces. God grant all of you many years. And to those of women in our lives who have fallen asleep in the Lord, may your memory be eternal. All right. Well, talk to everyone later. God bless you, and bye-bye.